standing strong and tall. Yeah, this is the Bullvine coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade, dairy strong legends being made. Yeah, this is the Bullvine coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade, dairy strong legends being
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, where real dairy voices bring you the stories behind the industry's headlines. Today, we're diving deep into a legacy that's shaped modern U.S. dairy policy and kept countless producers afloat through thick and thin. In this special episode, we sit down with Jim Mulhern, outgoing president and CEO of the National Milk Producers Federation, to talk about his decades of leadership, the big wins, the tough calls, and the unfinished business that matters most to dairy farm families. Grab your coffee, pull up a seat, and join us for an honest conversation about the challenges, lessons, and future of our industry, straight from a man whose story is measured one season at a time.
So I always find it's best to start at the beginning. So you've talked about in the past growing up in a small town in Wisconsin. How did your roots, or how did that growing up on a farm shape your wanting to get into farming and your career from there on?
Well, the journey for me started, in small town Wisconsin. My father had grown up on a dairy farm prior to World War II. After the war, he left the farm. It was a small dairy, but he moved to Milwaukee after the war to work, and then came back to the home area in south central Wisconsin, just north of Madison. And so I grew up with family members. My grandfather had a farm. Friends growing up had farms. So I spent a lot of time in and around farms, and that's what I knew. I also knew when I got into high school and headed to college that, having not grown up on a farm, I wasn't going to be a farmer. It just, if nothing else, the cost of starting up when you didn't have a family background or a family farm to go to back in those days, it wasn't going to happen. But I had that interest in agriculture, so that's why I majored in ag journalism at the University of Wisconsin, and figured that I was going to find my path into agriculture that way. I had a parallel interest in policy and politics that was kind of instilled in me at a young age. Some great teachers in junior high school, and it was I grew up in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, so it was a lot of political upheaval in the country during that period. I was just always interested in how politics could have an influence on society and on people, and had a chance to come to Washington, D.C. to do an internship when I was in college, work for my local member of Congress, and the issue portfolio that I worked on that summer was largely agriculture, which kind of fit my college background. And through that, I kind of put the two together. And when I finished college, I got my degree in ag journalism. I went to work for a milk marketing cooperative based in Wisconsin, but representing producers it was marketing, so it wasn't a processing or manufacturing co-op. It was a marketing and testing service co-op. It represented producers in the 5-state area: Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And we did a lot of work on policy issues for our members. So that's really where I got deeply engaged in the policy side of it. But, going back to the beginning of the question, it really was growing up in a small town, in and around farms, loving the lifestyle and loving, the people, both family members and friends. So that lifestyle really appealed to me.
And was there someone who really helped shape all that, or someone, I think I read somewhere mentioned that you had a 7th grade teacher that really helped influence you or had an impact on this trajectory for you?
Yeah, it's very interesting when you get to this point in your life and you reflect back on how your journey played out. I've often thought of those teachers, and they have been at a young age. Teachers who they see something in a student and they sparked an interest. And for me, it was Mr. Houghton, my 7th grade social studies teacher, and he kind of just brought issues and politics to life. This is a guy who had been a Korean War veteran. I remember him talking about what it was like to be so I'm in school during the Vietnam War in junior high school, and it was, he brought to life what it was like, in the Army, where you're not, when you're fighting the enemy, especially in infantry back in those days, you're not shooting at somebody, you're kind of shooting. And somebody's over there, but you don't see your target. And that may sound like a very small example, but it kind of opened my eyes to things that I had no comprehension, no understanding of. And he had that ability just through making issues personal and real. And that stood out for me. And I had several teachers in high school who, my journalism teachers, who helped me they saw something in me. I wasn't a good writer, I didn't think, but I had an interest in issues and, could ask good questions. So it was along the way having teachers who took a deep interest in me, and I recognize now that's so important in forming a person's life. And so I give so much credit to people like that. And I will say that I had those kind of people all along my way in my career. When I went to Washington, the congressman that I interned for became my political mentor, because after a few years, he was the one I came back to Washington to work for on his staff full time. And, I learned so much in all those, but I've always taken that learning and tried to apply it with people who work for me, understanding the impact you can have on people and on their careers, on their lives, by taking an interest in them, seeing what spark they have, and trying to fuel it, try to boost it.
And I think when you look at your career, I think that who you serve or the interest in people comes through quite clear in the career you have had. Was there a time maybe during your career or early on that it really clicked for you that the policies and the work you were doing would have a real impact or could have a real impact on people?
I think I first realized that in my initial stint on Capitol Hill, working for a member of Congress from Wisconsin, with my portfolio of issues that I handled was, agriculture, some environmental issues, but also federal budget and tax policy issues. And in the office that I worked in, you not only covered the issues, but you drafted the correspondence when constituents would write letters or call in concerned about an issue. You do the research and draft a letter for the congressman to review and to sign and send back to the constituent. And we would do casework. Constituents would call in, they've got a problem with, back in those days, the USDA's agriculture farm, what is today the Farm Service Agency, back in those days was the old ASCS, Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Service, that actually came out of the 1930s and 1940s. So I did casework and worked on a number of issues that had a direct impact on farmers. So when you're talking directly to them, and you're working on issues that impact them, you really could see how the work you're doing does make a difference in people's lives. And on just issue after issue that occurred, that would happen. And when, for me, it was looking for more of that, more opportunities to how can I keep increasing, the impact that I can have on policy that matters to people that I that I know or that I can picture their lives. And it was easy to do in agriculture. And it was, in Washington, D.C., where there are every issue under the sun is addressed at the federal policy level. You get into your area, get into that lane, and work the issues. You get to know the people who are engaged in the issues and are impacted by it, and you get that dialogue going. So it really was a way to practice what I would call kind of retail politics and retail policy. You're impacting people, and you can talk to them and find out what their needs are, and then try to figure out ways to address those.
And dealing in the dairy industry, that there's a lot of people with strong opinions. You've become known for that kind of collaborative leadership style. Is there a moment when that really clicked for you, or someone who helped to really focus you on that, or is it just something you had to develop over time?
Well, I think part of that collaborative style I think started early for me. I was the middle child in a family of 9, and in a working class family. If I didn't collaborate, I had 2 older brothers and 2 younger brothers. I was stuck right in the middle, and then I had 4 sisters. If I didn't collaborate, I wasn't going to get enough to eat, and you learn to work things out. So, I joke that it really did start early on in life for me, but I think probably more impactful was working with mentors who I saw how they operated, and it was people who put people first. I was fortunate to work for a member of Congress who was actually, I don't think he certainly wouldn't thrive and perhaps not even survive in politics today. He was very self-effacing. It was never about him. It was about policy and what he could get done. Had very strong views on issues, but he knew his constituency and he really wanted to represent them. So I just found in agriculture, I think there's something about the people in agriculture that are largely collaborative. Yeah, there's a lot of strong opinions, and I've dealt with people with strong will, but I've been able to deal with them. And I think the biggest thing I've always found is to listen. If you listen to people carefully and can understand what it is they want and need, you can't deliver it 100%, but you get a sense of what can and will work. And politics, as we all know, is art of compromise. You got strong views on both sides. You're trying to work them out, and we're kind of missing that, I think, in our politics today. It's one of the challenges we have as a country, and I think it's not just the U.S. It's Canada's just had its elections, and there's divisions there. Europe has the same situation. It's kind of around the world where we're separating into our camps rather than trying to come together and work that middle ground where I think everything that's important really happens. So for me, collaboration was just a natural. And I think in every aspect of life, you think of a relationship you're in. To be successful in a relationship, you've got to collaborate. You've got to work things out. And it's the same in business. And any organization, you've got to try to work things out to move things forward. So for me, it's always been kind of a duh. This is what you have to do to get things done.
And looking back, are there certain incidences, projects, or initiatives that really stand out that you're the most proud of, that you were able to accomplish that over your career?
Andrew, when you have a long career of, for me, 45 plus years, I was able to be fortunate to be engaged in a lot of different issues and battles. And there are a number of them that come to mind. I think on the dairy policy side, our industry has, throughout my life, had to deal with those issues of supply and demand balance. Dairy farmers, dairy cows are so incredibly productive. You give us a market and we can produce all the milk for that and then some. And trying to achieve that balance between supply and demand so that you can have good market prices is something that this industry has, struggled with forever. Policies have had an impact on that. I was involved in, some of the fights. The 1980s was early 80s was a period of huge milk surpluses in the U.S. And the federal government was buying product, cheese, butter, non-fat dry milk, and putting those into storage, and then would sell them back to the trade when prices, improved. But it was a gerbil on a wheel. You were always kind of stuck in, as soon as prices got better, USDA would by law have to start selling product back to the trade, and that would depress prices. So we knew we needed to try to deal with that. Panel has dealt with it through supply management, and there's a lot of success that's had for the Canadian dairy industry. In the U.S., there's been less interest in supply management. We're long past that period in virtually all of our commodities where supply management is used. It just is, it's not a viable issue, and producers really don't want that. But we have to try to develop policies that, provide some safety net to producers. And I will say that evolution from the dairy diversion program in the early 80s to the dairy termination program in the mid 80s, when we actually USDA, federal government, paid producers to sell their entire herds and exit the business, and got a payment for doing that. That was a way of trying to achieve supply and demand balance. We moved away from those. Moving ahead through the years, we've moved toward a risk management approach. And I've been very pleased to be part of that evolution in policy to get to the point today where we have, I think, a very effective safety net program in the dairy margin coverage program here in the U.S. that works very well for small and medium-sized producers and provides catastrophic protection to large producers. So there's something for everybody in that program, and it does so with producer engagement. So they pay they pay a premium for the coverage, and it's done a great deal to provide an effective safety net and balances the program by not providing not putting excess burden on taxpayers. It's not an expensive, costly program, and it doesn't interfere with the marketplace. So I think that the movement toward risk management during the course of my career is a major thing that I'm pleased with. Lots of other issues as well that we could talk about, but that's a big one.
So you have mentioned in the past that working with the board, with Randy Mooney and the board, has had a very positive influence in bringing about these changes. Can you comment on how that has affected your ability to move policy forward?
Well, I will say that the 10, 11 years that I was head of National Milk, I was blessed by having incredible leadership, both in the chair, my officers and executive committee, and the full board. When I came in, I did so with a lot of experience in the dairy industry. I'd worked on dairy policy. When I took the job as president and CEO, I was 30 plus years into my career in dairy policy. So I had a really good perspective on the history, what works, what doesn't work. And I think a maturity at that point that I did not want to spend my time tilting at windmills, just taking on issues that we weren't going to be able to resolve or that we could not get agreement on. I've been through some of those issues earlier in my career where the industry was divided, and I knew that there's just no point banging your head against the wall to push something when you've got a 50-50 or even a 60-40 and almost a 70-30 split in your membership. If you don't have a solid group behind you pushing an issue, you're going to lose at the end of the day in the halls of Congress. And that's something I talked to the board about, talked to leadership about when I started. But what I was most pleased about was the response of the leadership. I was blessed to work for an incredible chairman in Randy Mooney. Randy was chair when I came in. He was also chair of, and is chair of Dairy Farmers of America, wears, both critically important hats for the U.S. dairy industry. And in my work with him at National Milk, the leadership he provided was just outstanding. He is a tremendous farm leader. There were, so many issues where I would have an idea, and Randy was very, I will say, very patient with me, and understood the membership and what we could get done as well or better than I did. And the ability to, the trust that he had in me and that I had in him, that we developed early on, it just helped so much. And then Randy was surrounded by a group of officers and executive committee, all working together. These are people that are elected from their dairy cooperatives across the country. So they're heavily engaged in running their own cooperatives, come together on the national stage to lead the producer community on, so many issues that we deal with at the federal level. It's not just economic issues that I've talked about some, but, the trade issues, labor issues, environmental issues, nutrition policy, tax policy, on and on and on. I mean, there's just no shortage of challenges and opportunities for the dairy producer community. And to have we had the cream of the crop from across the country, the leaders in their own organizations and their own communities come together into the national organization, roll up their sleeves, and work together on issues that affect, many of them affected them differently in different parts of the country and, different size cooperatives. But the success we had by those folks pulling together and agreeing with my approach that if we didn't have a strong consensus, a substantial majority, it really didn't make sense to try to push an issue on Capitol Hill where we're 60-40. And I think that was one of the keys of our success, the trust that they put in me and the trust that I had in them when I saw how they responded to the perspective that I provided and the staff provided. We had a great relationship, and it made the job not just possible, but it made it a real joy.
Now, I heard you mention the term herding cats, and I think about that in the regards to the federal milk marketing order and one of the major initiatives that you had to work through. How did you go about building the consensus amongst the co-ops to, maybe adjust the goals or maybe goals that are completely different from before? How were you guys able to make that work?
I think there was several secrets to the success in that effort. One was the timing in which we took it on. I knew, having been through federal order process at the local level, working on issues at the federal order, the geographic local level, and I started my career, how they operated, and then had been involved in some of the major reform and federal orders in the late 90s and the early aughts when, Congress did an overhaul or set up an overhaul in the federal order program in the 1996 Farm Bill, and then we had hearings and came through the 2000. Since no major changes have been made since 2000, the program was up, and it needed some updating, needed some changes. But I knew that we had to wait to get through some other issues first, Farm Bill. And, sometimes it's when you take an issue on that is critically important. Pressure had to build. And by the time that we moved forward with federal order modernization, because it really wasn't reform. We reformed it back in 2000. What we needed to do was modernize the system because no major changes had been made, and it wasn't working as well as it could have. Industry moved forward. Things change. Just simple things like the content of milk fat and protein, the solids not fat in milk, naturally occurring because of the improvements in animal genetics, they changed over 25 years. But we had pricing formulas that were tied to the protein and solids not fat content, and even the average butterfat content of herds in 2000. That's just one example. So as we moved forward, it was clear that the time was right to try to take on some of these issues and put together a comprehensive update to the federal orders. One of the things that was key was to understand and make sure our producers understood that the federal order program, since it's a national program, but it has regional impacts because you have 12 different federal orders in different parts of the U.S. and they have most of the provisions of them are the same, but in terms of the pricing structure on Class 1 fluid milk differs around the country. So different orders had different issues, and part of this process was putting together a package that balanced all of that. We laid out up front, and Randy was a key part of this. Randy Mooney was a key part of this. We laid out up front that nobody was going to get everything they wanted. But if we all got together in a room, rolled up our sleeves and worked on it, we could improve this system and modernize it like it needed to be done. And that was the start of a process that lasted over at least 18 months. We had hundreds of meetings, and we had the experts at the co-op level. They came together and, sat down in rooms, meeting after meeting, and Zoom calls, talking through these issues to come up with a package. We met with the processors and tried to, deal with some of the issues there. It was a comprehensive, incredibly complex process, but it started with the understanding that we could get things done if we worked together. And nobody was going to get everything they wanted, but if we rolled up our sleeves, worked together, we could get this done. And that was key to the process. Another critically important part of this process was having the right leadership to manage it. And I knew from my experience working on these issues that it was going to take somebody who had the expertise of using the federal order system at the cooperative level on, how milk moves, what plants it goes to, how it's priced. And I was incredibly fortunate to convince Jim Sleeper, who had extensive experience in the industry. He had worked for co-ops. He worked on the proprietary side. He had recently retired. I was able to convince Jim to take this effort on and lead it. And he's the guy that herded cats. He spent an incredible amount of time over that 18 months leading our effort, pulling people together, and working out the fine minutia and details of this. The guy done. So huge credit for quarterbacking this whole effort goes to Jim and all the people at our co-ops who were engaged in the guys who rolled up their sleeves, the people who rolled up their sleeves and worked together to come up with that package.
And when you talk about major changes, especially major changes that haven't happened in quite some time, that directly affect the producers' bottom lines, their sustainability, you get a lot of reaction, you get a lot of emotion. What message or what comments, now that we've gone through that, would you say to producers that they should understand or also take away from all this?
Well, one of the key aspects of all of this was at the end of the day, we wanted to have a package of modernization that was balanced. That when you adjust these formulas, they have an impact. And at the end of the day, what the federal milk marketing order system is about is assuring the orderly marketing of milk to protect producers and consumers. it came out of a period, if you go back to the start of the federal order system in the 1930s, producers would ship their milk off to a handler, and they would be told what was the butterfat content. Back in those days, most of the milk was priced just on butterfat. We didn't price it on protein and other solids. You had no way of knowing if, the test you were told was the butterfat content of your milk was actually what was in that milk. And producers were at a disadvantage to their processors. The federal order system was designed to protect producers, and that's fundamentally important. It is a producer program overall, and it's producers who vote on that program. Any changes you make to a federal order, whether it's your own individual federal order or, in this case, the national program, those are voted on at the local level by producers. And it's also designed to protect consumers, because you're trying to make sure that you have an adequate supply of milk, so you don't have, the roller coaster pricing on milk. Stability is important to producers. It's important to consumers. So that's really the heart and soul of the program. It needed to be updated. It needed to be modernized, as I said, to bring it up to date with the pricing formulas. And one of the factors of the federal order program is, again, the pricing of Class 1 fluid milk. And so that is a regulated price. It really is the only regulated price in the system, because the price of milk that goes into cheese and whey and butter and non-fat dry milk, the four major components, those are all determined in the marketplace. And then there's a formula that's used to calculate, it's called the end product pricing. What is you take the value of milk going into cheese. There's a cost of making that cheese, and that has to be calculated to get the right end product price on a hundredweight basis. It's known as the make allowance or the manufacturing allowance. It's the cost of manufacturing product. Those factors in the formula have not been increased for a long time. They need to be updated. But when you adjust them, that has that's a deduct. That is it reduces. You take the price of cheese, reduce it by the wholesale price of cheese, and reduce it by the cost of making it, and some other factors. That's a deduct. It's going to reduce the price to producers, but you got to reflect what is that cost, and that was key to this whole process. We didn't want a program at the end of the day that we modernized the system, but it cost producers money. The Class 1 differentials had not been adjusted for some time. We needed to adjust those to reflect today's market conditions. So it was trying to get that balance that was important in the process, and I think we did a great job. And I think the vote of producers endorsing the modernization proposal from USDA is a reflection of that. It's not a program that's going to doesn't ensure profitability to anybody, but you do want to make sure that system is providing orderly marketing and is providing transparent pricing to producers. And that really is what it does. And now that we've updated it, modernized it, it does it better than it did prior to the changes that were made.
Now, another program that you've championed quite heavily, and rightfully so, was the farm program, not just for its animal care, but also about how it connects us with consumers and helps build trust with consumers. What do you wish more producers knew about the farm program, and how do you see it shaping the industry's future?
I think the farm program is one of the best programs that the industry has developed. I go back to a time when we didn't have a farm program. We weren't able to tell consumers with facts and figures. We weren't able to tell consumers the great story of quality, high level quality animal care in this industry. We could talk about it, and people could see the old, the red barn and the silo, and they would hope that Farmer Jones was doing a great job taking care of their animals. But we didn't have a way to quantify that and to tell that story to consumers. The development of the farm program came about at a time when we were seeing more animal rights activist engagement, more attacks on animal agriculture. We knew, all of us in dairy knew the level of care on our farms. We didn't have an ability to communicate that. What I wish that the producers better understood, and frankly, I think we're over that hump now. I think producers really do get this, is the farm program helps us tell a very, very important story to consumers on the quality of animal care. All of those, issues that are reviewed in a animal care evaluation that farmers do, the on-farm evaluation done by their evaluator, all that information is aggregated at the co-op level, at the processor level, and then at the national level. And it tells a great story of the quality care. Virtually all of the indices in that farm program evaluation, we look at each one of them and then look at the data that results when we do all those evaluations. We are north of 90% adherence, as high as 98, 99% adherence across the country with those standards. That is a wonderful story to tell consumers, and it's helped push back against activists who want to attack the industry and suggest that animals are not treated well. We have the facts and figures to show the quality of care. But I think equally important is the continuous improvement that it helps for individual producers. It benchmarks. You're able to benchmark how you're doing on your operation versus others in your co-op or processor for proprietary processors. How you're doing in your region, how you compare nationally, how you compare by farm size. It's an incredible tool for producers to use to improve their operations. And going beyond animal care, we've added very important features to the program in sustainability and in workforce development, where we're actually helping people benchmark what are the best human resource practices on the farm, and that enables producers to step up their game to see what others are doing and improve. So at its heart and soul, the farm program is about continuous improvement. And when you think about what we're doing in this industry, and frankly, any industry, is trying to improve. And this is a great way to help us on that journey of continuous improvement.
So beyond pricing and programs, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the dairy industry going forward? What do we need to change? What on the farm level, on the policy level, at the government? What do we need to do to make sure that the industry stays strong?
Well, there's any number of issues that we could talk about here. Let me focus on two of them because I think they're critically important. That they've been around with us for a while, and we've got to get them right, and we're not there yet. Perhaps the biggest issue that I dealt with in terms of the industry's future while I was at National Milk was this issue of farm labor, and we're not close, unfortunately, to getting that issue resolved. I can't tell you the number of producers I've talked to who this is an existential issue. This is the issue that keeps them up at night, and in many ways, today it's getting worse rather than getting better. Let's start with some facts. We know that the majority of the milk produced in the U.S., the vast majority of milk produced in the U.S., comes from farms with immigrant labor. And we also know that a large percentage of that immigrant workforce is undocumented. And we can't run our farms without that workforce. It just can't do it. So without those workers and without a solution to it, we're in a world of hurt at the farm level, and we're going to be in a world of hurt at the consumer level because we're not going to have the milk and the dairy products that people want to consume. We've got to get this right, and it's taken forever. We've spent so much time trying to get access to a legal workforce in the face of a national situation where these workers are demonized, and now we're seeing raids on some farms going after people. There's no question that we need a strong immigration policy and strong border protection in this country. There's no question that there is an issue. But we're, I think, in my view, kind of in the ditches on both sides on this issue. And it has defied solution, defied people trying to, work together to get a consensus, because the issue works politically for some of the politicians on both sides. And, until we get this right, agriculture, not just dairy, but agriculture is suffering from this. I would say dairy is probably suffering more than any, because we don't have access to even a federal program that provides a legal immigrant workforce. That H-2A program that does help much of agriculture only, and producers know this well, I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know, H-2A only works for operations that need seasonal and temporary workers. Our workers are anything but that. They're full-time workers, 7 days a week, 2 milkings or 3 milkings a day. And we've turned to immigrant workers because that's the only folks who will work these jobs. They're tough jobs. They pay well. We have workers on our farms that have been there for 5, 10, 15, in some cases 20 years or more. These are great workers. We don't want to lose them. We've got to get this policy right, and unfortunately I don't, as long as it's as political as it is, and politicians stand to benefit on it, I fear that it's not going to get resolved. That number one has to get fixed. The other major issue that I would suggest is holding us back is trade policy. We're an incredibly productive industry. 225, 230 billion pounds of milk a year that we produce. We don't consume that much in the U.S. We have a great domestic market here. It is 85% of the amount of milk that we produce. But that 15% to 20%, because it can be up as much as that is in excess of domestic market needs. If we don't have a home for that, that's depressing market prices. If we don't have markets for that product, that means you got surpluses in the domestic market, and that's forcing prices down. On the international level, we've suffered from barriers that many countries have erected to keep our product out of their markets. Whether those are tariff barriers or non-tariff, trade barriers, they're very effective at keeping us from achieving the level of export to markets that we could. I think long term, the future for U.S. dairy is great, because we're going to get access to those markets. The world needs protein. Dairy is the best protein you can consume. So I think long term, we're going to be in great shape as an industry. But this next 5-10 years, if we don't see trade agreements that address this problem and provide greater access around the world, we're in an era where it's mostly bilateral agreements as opposed to multilateral negotiations at the World Trade Organization. WTO is basically moribund, if not dead, and it's mostly bilateral negotiations. That's a challenge, and we've been working very hard as an industry to increase market access between National Milk and the U.S. Dairy Export Council. Tremendous efforts to get into those markets, but we have to have trade negotiators and trade agreements that break down these barriers and get us into those markets. And here too, there's a lot of talk and general statements about expanding market access, but we haven't seen the kind of detail negotiations that's necessary to increase that market access. So, I could say a lot more. That's probably more than people want to hear, but I would say that farm labor and trade policy are the two biggest issues that we have to get right if we're going to achieve the kind of success that this industry is capable of.
Okay. Sorry, you hear a pause there just because it's me doing a backup because I noticed my one recording. Okay.
That's okay.
Yep, that's great. It's just me making a note, and then I'm just making a note, and then I paused. So we'll continue on. So you talk about these challenges that we face, and now you're handing off the reins to Greg and the team. What's the one lesson or one piece of advice you would share with them about stepping into the big dairy policy role and what it actually takes and why it matters and what they need to do?
Well, the great thing about Greg is he doesn't need advice from me on these challenges and issues. He's a veteran ag policy hand. He's got as much experience as I do in Washington. He's got broader experience in other commodities, and he worked for the National Cow and Beef Association. He worked on the commodity markets. So he's got great experience, and equally important, he has a great team behind him. I will say that I was blessed when I came to National Milk to have a great staff. I knew the folks on staff because I had been working with the organization prior to becoming president and CEO. I'd been a consultant to National Milk. So these are people I knew what I was getting into, and it's one of the reasons the job was appealing to me. I knew I had a great team. I was able to add to that team over time. By the time I left, the board heard from me many times, I would say, that without equivocation, I felt we had the best trade association agriculture team in Washington, bar none. Team of experts who not only knew their issues well, but were dedicated to member service, smart, hardworking people, passionate about this industry, just like our members are. And that team continues to just hit the ball out of the park. So I felt very good when I stepped down that the organization was in great shape with the staff, and I think the board chose a great successor in Greg, and I've been able to watch over the last year plus now, watch Greg and the team, and they're doing an outstanding job. They don't need advice from me.
True, but you're also now being recognized as the World Dairy Expo Industry Person of the Year. What does that mean to you? I think it's kind of a full circle moment. You'll be coming back to Madison. What does this mean to you looking back at your career, but also looking forward?
Well, this is just an incredible honor to be recognized by the World Dairy Expo board and leadership. I mean, we're talking about the cream of the industry here. When I look at the list of people who have received this award, it's like the Hall of Fame in dairy, and so I'm just incredibly honored. And I don't think I fully deserve this award. I will say that for me, what I think about is all the people that I've worked with, and in whatever brief remarks I get a chance to make at Dairy Expo, that's kind of my focus. I view this as a shared award. It goes back to Mr. Houghton, my 7th grade social studies teacher, has a hand in this award all the way through the team, my staff that I worked with at National Milk, the board, the officers, executive committee, Randy Mooney. This is a collective award that, because everybody helped me on this journey. Everybody's had a part of it that I've worked with, and for me, that's the biggest honor when I think of all the experiences I've had, the people I've worked with. This recognition for me is well done by a lot of people, and I feel very humble. I feel very blessed to have had the career I've had, and to get this kind of recognition is just it's very humbling. It really is.
And what does the next act? What keeps you busy now, or what are your ambitions or plans going forward?
I will say I'm finding a little bit more time to enjoy life than I was able to during my working years. One of the things that I did find at National Milk, when you work for people who are working 7 days a week, and from sun up to past sundown, you end up doing a similar extent to yourself, and so there were a lot of things that passed me by that I didn't get a chance to enjoy as much. I'm really trying to spend my time on that. I am trying to give back. I'm trying to do some mentoring of people. Again, I've talked about how important that has been in my life. I think I owe that to other people to do, so I'm doing a little bit of that. But I'm also, taking the time to do some travel, both domestically and a little bit internationally. It's a big world. There's a lot to see and do out there. I am trying to, spend more time with my adult children. Now they have less time than they had when they were younger, but still, I'm very close to them, and it's nice to be able to spend time with them and my siblings. So this, for me, my professional career took a lot of my focus, and now I'm trying to spend a little bit more time on family, on friends, and on health. I've always tried to stay in health. I was a runner for many years. I've moved toward biking more now. My knees and hips hurt when I run. They don't hurt when I'm biking, so I'm no dummy. I spend more time on the bike. But just working out, hiking, do a little fishing, bird watching, some of the things that I just enjoyed. I'm really trying to, you said this act of life. I look at it as Act 3 in life, and I'm trying to spend Act 3 vigorous, active, but also to keep learning and keep enjoying, because that's what this period of life is for, I think.
And if you had one final thought or something that you would want to leave our listeners thinking about the dairy industry, about the future of the dairy industry, and why they should be optimistic about it, what would you say to them?
Well, I just think this is an incredible industry. I think the future is very, very bright. It starts with the quality of the animals and the people in this industry, and I think that follows through virtually every aspect of this industry. And I will say that one of the things, I've had a chance over the course of my 45-year career to work, I wasn't full-time in dairy all the time. I've had a couple of stints where I did consulting for, other businesses as well. Worked with lots of people, lots of industries, Fortune 200 companies, but I always kept coming back to dairy. And, I couldn't put my finger on it early on, but I did realize over time it's because of the people. There are incredible people in this industry. I don't know exactly what it is about this industry that attracts such high-level people. I think perhaps part of it is that you're nurturing an animal. You're not raising an animal from birth to slaughter. You're raising an animal for its productive life. And it may sound strange to people who are engaged in dairy on a full-time basis, but I think that has something to do with breeding people in a certain way, or instilling something in people in a certain way. So it's the people that make this industry great, and I've never lost sight of that. When I think of the future, and I think of the quality of the product that we produce, the nutritional aspects, I just think the future for this industry is just so bright. And as long as we've got people at National Milk, at U.S. Dairy Export Council, at the Dairy Checkoff Program, all working together to move us forward, I think we've got a very, very bright future.
And I think so as well. And with that, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. It really means a lot to get to know. We see you winning the award at Expo, but to get to know the story behind it really was enjoyable for all of us. We also appreciate your candor and the fact that you've championed the industry so much for so many years. Truly deserving of this year's award. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been an honor and a privilege. really has.
That's it for today's episode of the Bullvine Podcast. Huge thanks to Jim Mulhern for sharing his story, perspective, and candor with our audience. If you found these insights valuable, make sure to subscribe and share the show with your fellow producers and friends in the dairy community. For more ground-level stories, policy updates, and practical advice, check out thebullvine.com and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep your boots muddy, your barns full, and your spirits high. Thanks for listening.